the traditional city, the Carthusian city, and the landscape city, and a hybrid of them all. Line numbers will take you a composite of that. To try to, as we move around, to see which of these different models is been upgrading. And as you will see, many times they're hybrid, they're not pure. So can someone sort of describe of the three models? And I don't know how we can do it, we speak loud. Can someone say of the three models, what does the campus represent? So we have the traditional one, which is plazas, streets, continuous street walls, the traditional city, from a Chinese village to New York. Then we have the Carthusian city, objects in the park, where the streets are reduced to mobility systems. And then we have the landscape, the typology, where we're dealing with topography, vegetation. What would you say the campus is? Tic tac, tic tac.
Objects in a park,
Objects in a park, check. Only
maybe.
one. So you have two opinions here. We started it. But anyone go for the third one? Yeah. Thank you. So we started with a typology that is a combination, because obviously they're the street walls, like streets and plazas that are contained, but most of the buildings are detached. So they're objects in the green. And if we took away that, the masses of vegetation, the campus would not be the same at all. So we have started with a typology that is already a weird combination of the three of them. And as you would see, the other aspect is that how people use the space. Do they feel comfortable? Is it safe? I don't think the word safety exists in Singapore. It's such a highly controlled society where everything works. You don't worry about that. We at 3 a.m. naked. No one would even look at you. Maybe but if you in cities like in Philadelphia or in Caracas or in African cities, you go the wrong way at the wrong time, you might get into trouble. So this idea of how a place becomes safe because of the activities. Eyes on the city, as Jane Jacob would say. So this is something I would like you to take into consideration as we move around. How do you feel in these places? I would argue, sorry to take some time to kick off thing, that the traditional city of street walls, where people are in the rubber, no one enters there. That we're protected. So that is public, that is private. But in the object, the park thing, sometimes it's ambiguous what is public and what is private. I would argue that if this campus that is so beautiful, one of the great Ivy League schools, 25,000 students, was not under the rule of an institution that is, believe me, that with my face, if I'm walking 2 bikes, I'm stopped at night by the campus police. Which is not very nice, okay? Because there's an institution that's taking care of this place. So there's certain typologies in certain contexts that are safer than others, or they need an organization to maintain it and to run it. The traditional city is a bit safer because you have this information that's public, that's private, you have more eyes in the city. Are we okay? So let's go. As we move around, one more thing. This occurred to me yesterday. We'll be seeing 100 things, anecdotes, places, ask questions, whatever. I'm going to ask you the day of another little exercise, but it's very simple, of the final exhibit to prepare one image, one PowerPoint image, and one statement that may read, Philadelphia is the city offers, Philadelphia does not. Something that you, during the trip, call your attention, that you think is relevant. And it could be something that you appreciated, how hybrid it is, the social opportunities that it gives, those that are excluded, latent opportunities that are happening there. So one small sentence, and it could be one image or it could be a collage of images. But we'll go very quickly and see what you've got, okay? So as you move around, say, this will be a topic, okay? And this is very beautiful, not only understanding what a place is, but you start discovering opportunities that you might use in your design process. Okay, cool. Bien, is it working? China, hello.
Right off the bat experience walking across the street. David, when was the first time you walked around the streets of Philadelphia?
The day I arrived 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
20 years ago, and the city has changed.
I would say so.
Uh-huh. Those are beautiful, that section. If you eliminate the trees, the lampposts, the section will change completely. If you leave the lampposts, the trees, the pavements, and you replace that with a parking lot, the section will be different, and the idea of containment or placemaking is different. So again, I would hope that nobody will design a section or say, oh, this is my plaza, and refer only to what's in the horizontal plane. If you don't make reference to the containment of that, then that's not the plaza, okay? And we see this many, many times. We're creating a plaza. No, it is, Cindy Sanders, which is the CEO of Olin Partnership, she would always say, think and draw beyond the space that you're designing. The more information you get, the better. Cool. How far this is registered? We don't know. Move it, move it, move it, move cab.
Oh my. Anyone out there watching? Welcome to Penn.
This is like the perfect day for this.
It's beautiful out, 75 degrees, not so humid, rained last night. Everything's green and luscious. Hayden Hall, this is where the engineers are, if you couldn't tell. Whoop.
We'll never make it.
Thanks, man. I'm really trying here. All the people that can't come to this beautiful day, we got video for it. Hopefully my battery lasts. My Wi-Fi or what is it? Data. Rick. There's a large bill I'm getting paid for. Yeah, we walked around Penn Park several times.
Okay, so why change the route or not?
I mean, I would be interested in what you have to say about it.
And when we went to Penn Park, we crossed the river, or did you do?
We did not cross the river. We've never crossed the river. We just walked down to the water, kind of. we don't even know what a river is.
What? I know you came here to walk tour, but we'll be seeing different things from crossing the river and whatever. The other thing that, of course, cities are not static; they're in constant flux, in transformation. So I've been here for about 20 years. You can't imagine how much this has changed, and compared to the dynamism of Chinese cities or Latin American cities, Philadelphia takes it easy. The economy is rather slow and whatever changes take time. But you can't imagine how much has occurred in 20 years. So, for instance, going back to this idea of what the intervention in the open space does in relation to the buildings that contain them, this thing here was a huge parking lot when I arrived. All the buildings are exactly the same. But when this green was commissioned, it made such a complete change because you're dealing with the buildings. You're not changing the uses. You're only changing the public realm. Okay, so that I think that's when you start calibrating one thing with the other and the value. Now the question is that many times when you're designing, you take into consideration how complex and how rich the edges are, the containment is, because that might define how complex or simple the open space is. They're in constant dialogue. So that's another layer of information. If you're not considering how rich the context is, then you don't know how elaborate or how subtle the intervention in the landscape is. Okay? They work on however some changes. For instance, in the stadium, as you notice, how many people use this gym?
A lot. Not right now, but
Well, okay, this was a complete dead wall until they put in the gym, and at some point there was a cafeteria that made the site safer and more amicable. So it's an area that if there's not something going on in the stadium, there's really not much activity. So the more you have different eyes on the city, that is relevant. So there you have the general the building, and where you're just changing a use within the building and you're modifying the facade. Okay.
these trees are like the perfect size for renderings too. Right at that 15-year mark.
Yeah. Did you spend any time within the Penn Park or not?
Yeah, we've walked in there for grading in workshop 2 and 3, I think. And we also had a soil lecture on how the soils were built.
That's that also. What's the
Oh, on that road that
medical
they're
school is so bad, that building that they
the
did.
medical school right behind the giant beautiful museum.
And this is what is this brilliant, well-known British architect that designed it. I mean, he's one of the big shots,
Yeah, the giant hill.
and he made that disaster.
It's the Great Wall of Penn.
I wrote a letter to the provost
You should.
saying shameful.
Shameful.
Having a design school and an agency that controls, what the projects are.
Yep. Ooh, look at this little grading up here. This little ramp. This little bridge. Love it. Nice little trees. Here's a dogwood. These are willow oaks. Chestnut oak. Oh, we're moving faster. We're just straight up running.
Okay, guys, why? So obviously we're in a transition point between the cyber campus and we're going into something different. I know you've been in the park, but if you're relating them to the 3 models, agency. Yeah, it's landscape and infrastructure. So I mean, you don't even see buildings. No, the buildings are in the background or way at the outer edges. Why does this landscape exist?
Old industrial remnant.
Old industrial remnant. And that industrial remnant is here because of
River.
yes, we needed the transportation, and it's on the floodplain
And the rails, right? Because it's on both sides.
So you have rail transportation, water transportation, and you have the industrial infill on the floodplain. And many times these rivers will flood. Yeah, and so what? You move the goods out of the warehouses, but you don't have people living in there. I find it also really
Airport line.
like this device and Penn Park was built only 10 years ago. This was a wasteland, a land. I'm sure you've heard this in your classes before. And notice with a very simple connectivity device. As a small pedestrian bridge, you were able to establish this link. And you were able to, thanks to the topographic change, you were able to bridge over. Well, in China, they would make fun of us. This is a toy train. This is Amtrak. This is the main rail corridor of the United States between Washington, New York, the economic capital of the world, many would say, and Boston, you know, and it's a stupid rail. However, it's a barrier. And through the landscape move, you're able to bridge the barrier. Are we okay?
Yeah.
And then we go, And as you move through the city, you'll find that in the industrial cities, there are many of these corridors. So I call attention to this is that these are all the cities that we're adapting to. We're bridging over. We're creating recreational spaces of what used to be industrial. But many times when you're designing cities, you have to deal with these mobility systems that usually break the city, create divisions. But you're able to navigate them again through sections. Cool.
So we just came over the pedestrian bridge and we're entering high above, kind of in the tree canopies. Sweet gums.
Not bad. But the light is like perfect now.
You get sort of the reflection of the tall buildings over there.
Beautiful.
Good eye, good eye.
Beautiful.
So you guys just say.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Those triple trees.
Oh, yeah.
All photography modes, creating the room. I'm sure that people explained it for you. We're thinking in spatial containment, in spatial definition. I'm sure you studied soils, what happened here, how they mediated what the planting is all about. But on all that's important. And on the other hand, this guy, MVVA, they have a program. They're saying we want so many tennis courts. We want the football court. I don't know if you saw it in the winter when you were here. You have an inflatable structure that appears in the cold winter. So you have things that are more ephemeral. So
Where's chestnut? Chestnut oak. Ooh, Eastern catalpa. I know the Latin ones. MVVA and their triple trees.
The triple, blended frames. Super bunch of sweet.
Yeah, they're really cool. Especially when they get really old.
yes, you talked about this. One of the Michael's Biggs is trying to create these rooms where through topographic moves, not only you create containment and sense of place, but you're able to set out of the scene the mobility systems. We did it in the Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York. So when you're down there, you're playing, you don't have an idea that you're next to a major highway. So visually, you're taking the cars out of sight, you're taking the noise. Again, all topographic changes. Listen, if somebody during your professional life, if you're called to work on campuses and on the medical schools of campuses, first do a thesis on how you can keep a medical school from becoming a mess. Because what you have is blocks and blocks on blocks of single-use buildings, which tend to be inward-looking. So I guess none of you would feel comfortable walking around the medical school at night, because there's no eyes on the city. It's these huge continuous facades of nothing, of garages and single uses. It's very difficult. So maybe we will see one of the first medical schools designed by you guys. With good landscape, with good street activity, with
life sciences. Let's go, baby. I think that would also make for a healthier environment for people to recover too. Trees,
oh my
ponds,
God. And seeing other people.
seeing other people. Yeah.
And not being
Crazy.
locked up in a room.
Yeah, with all the beeps around you and the
Well said.
little
Well
grass.
said. Did you come across this bridge when it came?
No.
No.
It's a good biking bridge though, although it has some crazy warping. The Schuylkill River and 76.
Woo! I would love to ask Michael, where did this come from? So after you do this huge effort of bridging over the rail, creating all these beautiful spaces, then you come to this ramp, you look, and you end up in a super parking lot under the South Street Bridge. Most people that walk on the bridge don't even have a clue that you can connect to it. Why? Why? We don't know. It should have led to the bridge, not through the belly of that rather unpretentious building. We don't know why. Or with a little effort, boom, you fly over this thing.
Wasn't that the original plan?
Maybe it was.
I think the original plan was that they were going across the Schuylkill at some point.
And then I don't know how many people have been on the walk on the Schuylkill Trail. I've toured this trail many times. When I arrived at Penn 20 years ago, it was still the old rail corridor. And it was edgy. You could walk there, but there was at night. And then gradually over 20 years, that is the Philadelphia time. In China, they do it in 3 months. Okay. In Madrid, they do it in 2 years, 17 miles of depressing the highway under the river. But here it takes time. Cindy Sanders always gives the example of Fairmount Park, which was the largest urban park in the United States. And does anybody know why the park was created there? One, the watershed, yes. What else? Was there a historic reason why they created the park?
Wasn't it old industry?
What were they
Oh,
celebrating?
watch out, guys.
Centennial of Independence, the World Fair for the Centennial of the Independence. Now, why was the park there?
That was the what?
Why was the park created there from the museum upstream?
To protect the water.
That's one. What was all this? Rail and industry, highly polluted. Okay, so this thing was like a city beautiful. The fair, we're greening the city. So we're a powerful industrial city, jobs, manufacturing, we're the leaders of the world, of the capitalist world, but we're greening it, we make it beautiful, we're celebrating the centennial. Now, why did the park begin there? Why didn't the industry continue going up? Oh, thank you. There's that topographic change where the dam is there.
The rapids.
So the rapids. And that was the first power plant of Philadelphia, hydro power plant of Philadelphia. taking advantage. I mean, it's not that it's a 35, 40 feet drop, but it was enough to create electricity. And therefore, although there was some industry in Manioc or whatever, there was not major navigation. And therefore, that river became cleaner, greener, and then, of course, it was not affected by the tides. Do you know why you have that fall there? Thank you. What is it?
Fairmont Plateau.
The fall line is a geological division between the coastal plain and the Piedmont.
Yes.
It runs miles along the northeast. And many of the cities that became hubs of the Industrial Revolution are located in the fall line because they took advantage of the hydroelectric power. So all these things make a lot of sense. By the way, the museum is on a hill, right? The Rocky Steps. What they did was the following. They used the hydro energy of the system, not only for electricity, but the pumps were able to raise water from the river to water tanks for the purification, for the aqueduct, where the museum is now. And then through gravity, it would feed the city. There was a point when this aqueduct was not enough, as it really grew and grew and grew, and there were other type of technology, and they knew they had to replace it. So they replaced it with other water systems, other watersheds. And what did they do with the hill? So that explains why the museum is there and what used to be the aqueduct. So all these things are connected to history and to theory and to movements that are happening throughout the world. Cool. Then, of course, when does this manufacturing industrial scenario start disappearing, and why? Why isn't there industry here anymore? Did somebody decide we're going to kill the industry?
Oh, the Erie Canal. New York became a larger commercial capital
Well,
of the
where
world.
did the industry or the manufacturing along the Delaware start disappearing?
Watch out.
60s, late 50s, after the war, for many reasons. One, it was the area of petroleum, and therefore the cities that were so important because of maritime trade. So all the cities that had access to the water, Boston, New York, Newark, Baltimore, started losing importance because all the mobility was not through maritime transportation, but through trucks, fueled by petrol, building super highways. It was a complete change in the economy, in the source of industry. That was one of them. Two, all the ports, like that ring Manhattan or that were here in the Schuylkill and the Delaware, were the finger ports, you know, with small cranes, very slow, rather inefficient, very labor intensive. In the 1960s, they invented containers. And that with very few people, you were able to move huge, but you need container yards. Because you're stacking them before you put them on the. So these container yards did not fit in the little finger piers. So the whole technology had to be changed. So gradually, all the ports that ring the rivers of Philadelphia or Manhattan were replaced, or Boston, by new ports relatively near the city, which is the big port of New York now. New Jersey, Newark, right there with rail lines, 20 minutes away, huge areas for container ports, where you have an airport, where you have rail, and where you have all the highways coming together. So there was a change in technology, you know, and in the source of energy. And in 10 years, whoa, the miles and miles of manufacturing turf vanished from the city. And that explains why Philadelphia, which was the capital of the Industrial Revolution of the United States, from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, lost over 1.5 million people. So instead of growing, whoa, and that explains all the vacancies and the poverty and these challenged communities that you're working with. Clear? So there we have a really interesting thing where you are dealing with changes in urban behavior, in the use of energy and technology that is affecting the life. In the 1960s, don't tell your parents to take you out of school, they called this place Philadelphia. The other thing is white flight. As they're building the highway system and as cars become much cheaper, the American dream. We're moving. Then what is the message over the media? The media was radio and television, no internet. Okay, move to the suburbs, cleaner air. Okay, back to nature. Blah 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 blah. Television. Go to the schools. So we're not saying socially divided and racially divided. So you're not dealing with the problems of the city, of the inner city, of poverty, of drugs, of violence. Go to the suburbs and be happy. Okay, so people are moving out. Whoa, all this is happening. And of course, it's not only spontaneously, the oil companies are telling the federal government, let's build interstates. Let's get people out of the city into the suburbs. And therefore, we sell cars and things like that. Ha ha. Are we okay? No. We have ocean fronts abandoned, and you're building highways to take people out to the suburbs. Where do you place the highways? It's a floodplain. We're not removing anybody. They're contaminated sites.
It's flat.
It's flat. Whoa, let's build them. Okay, and we create this mess. So many American cities that we're dividing the city from our waterfronts, whether the rivers or the ocean. One of the great examples is the thing like that went from Florida to the Canadian border, and that goes through so many of the all-American cities, making a mess of them, including Philadelphia, Boston, so many of them. Well, and now we have this very different situation. So how do we, I hope that in the next we're dismantling these highways. Well, they're great opportunities. The Grand Finale, great parking lot.
That whole trip, then you get to this parking lot. I feel like I'm coming into New York or something. Sorry. Shots fired. That is the ugliest building I think I've ever seen. And then you see the Penn Museum right underneath it. With the Penn Museum, we'll never see sun again. We don't get out much.
Come on, Zoom generation, move it.
How's everyone doing? It's getting warm. There's not much shade out here. A lot of loud streets. There's Philadelphia. The lucky crew out here today. Let's go.
This is ridiculous. How many of you guys have been here? Wow, brilliant.
Yeah, because that bridge, that road goes out to Gray's Ferry down there. So after that wonderful experience, we're brought here. Okay. Gotcha. Here we are. Welcome to a city street in America. Bike lane. Woo. Power plant. More life science buildings. Sounds for children. It's a pretty nice skyline. There's the vape pen, the USB, and then the Independence Towers. Hell of an intersection. Above 76.
Longest traffic lights in the US, I guess.
Here we go. Ooh, really nice reflections in the water. Dang it, you can't see it. Sorry, guys. There we go. There's the Schuylkill, our beautiful river.
Find out, as you were working on your studio site, when are they planning to bridge the Schuylkill to the Rogers Garden site?
No, not specific details, but I know it's in the works. They have a Parks on Tap right at the end of it. So I think they're starting to build community engagement around it.
That's going to be really awesome.
Yep, and they're building the new bridge right across the Schuylkill as well, near Bartram's Gardens, the Bartram Mile.
Fantastic.
There's a new pivot bridge, so that's going to open up this year. So then they're just waiting on that plastic extension around the bend.
Perfect. Let's try to make it with the slide.
Oh, we're trying to get over there. We can go down these stairs. Schuylkill Banks is what it's called here.
So to give you an idea of time frame, the Schuylkill Trail from the museum to about where this area over the water was finished about 10 years ago until they thought park. So the park was gone. This stretch over the water to here to the South Coast Bridge was finished about 4 years ago. 5 years ago. And then the other half a mile, quarter of a mile to the dead end that you know before crosses over was finished only 2.5 years. Why did they do this, by the way? Hi, hello. But why did they invest over the water?
Because they couldn't buy the rights on the railroad.
Yeah, so it was so narrow that there was no enough space. Unfortunately, it was not given to a good landscape firm, and that is why it has such a hard engineering feeling. No, I don't care. I should care because it looks like almost like a highway bridge, especially this ramp going down is so hostile. I guess some people have died on the bikes without brakes. I mean, you take 200 miles going down in a straight line. They have not died, but it's not. As I said, the amount. Okay.
You could.
Okay, they train, by the way, I don't know if you've been in here in the area in the winter, but this thing freezes. And then when there are very strong storms of wind, trunks of trees come down.
Mm-hmm.
So between the freezing and the trees, there's an impact on the structure. So their justification is that it had to be very robust. Of course, the structure had to be robust, but they didn't have to have this ugly, and so the whole morphology, the whole thing is not really
Classic architects. Do better, people. That's David's point today. Ah! Ah. Oh, I like the bike ramp though. Here, no, on the side of the stairwell.
Oh, that's not bad. Good.
That's something.
That's something. Okay.
They got a point.
I don't think I've seen it for a long time.
Very low.
Doesn't look so good.
Well, there was a big rain last night, so we got it all flushed out today.
Wow, when it started, it was raining last night.
The
It's like, oh,
thunderstorms, yeah.
Got all the warning.
Woo! And my phone was blowing up with alerts that the rain was coming. Oh, that's interesting. It's a little sketchy.
I guess I.
Oops, sorry. Oh my gosh, is this a bathroom? A public bathroom in America? No. Stop.
See, you see, we're a civilized city.
I want to go that far. So much quieter down here.
So people are using it, so it's an indication that the
It's
idea
loved.
was good.
Yeah.
You have a good concept for development of the idea.
Poor execution.
For execution. So, if you have this dialogue between what happens in the public realm and the adjacencies, where this was an abandoned dirt trail on the land part, and you had the rails, no one really wanted to live on the rails. Once when they started creating the trail, then many things happened. Like some of the old industrial lofts became condominiums. Like that one they just finished is office space. You see some of the new residential towers. And this is a very interesting case study where you have the urban fabric that ties to the Philly grid. You have the edge condition. You have the rail line that is still active. And then you have a few points of crossing to the pedestrian. So it's okay. I remember that for many years there was a sign that said cross at your own risk. You know, but once the trains were there, you know, and sometimes they parked for an hour, and I was running late to class on my bike. I said, so I threw the bike on the train and I helped myself. I never do it. Okay. You know, and then they built the first pedestrian bridge over the railroad, and then they built this one. So but it's a really interesting case study that sometimes active infrastructure can be compatible with civic space.
And the trail also gets really close to the train a lot of times, so it just dominates the experience. And Philadelphians can do it completely cool with it, which makes me happy.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a whole vibe. Yeah. Done a lot of painting along this trail. Spent a lot of time. There are the sewer outflows. Hey, good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, but we've gone a long way.
We're a lot further than where we were, but there's still a lot of fun to see. I like to come around with my map and try to figure out what stream that used to be.
You're right. This was yesterday's rain.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. If only there was a wetland or something to capture it. Filter water. It's a cool mural. Philadelphia, most muraled city in America. Trying to fill the space.
New.
All new, right?
No.
Because when did they allow building? Was it
It started,
1980, right? When they said the ordinance for Penn's Hat could be crossed?
Yes.
So all of these are pretty brand new.
Well, and all that, of course.
Of course,
all
yeah.
The city, but I mean, all these by
Yeah.
the water.
Yeah.
Have been in the last maybe 7, 8, 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. And the vape pen as well, brand new. They could have at least planted trees along it.
It's just ridiculous. It's bad, really bad. So guys, I hope you guys are in China will make it to the States quickly.
Mid-August, they will be here, and we're throwing parties, and every day we're going to be walking around, exploring a new city. It's going to be great. We're going to go sketching.
Well,
Got it all
hey,
planned.
usually when there's no COVID and you're working in Myers till 2 in the morning, and you make it they're going to parents of the Moscow for the first time, you know, and then when their parents and friends come for commencement, they do the David Walker. They chase exactly the same thing because they never leave. Engage with the city. Chinese, hello. Engage with Philly when you eventually make it here. Look, one of your friends.
Hey, there's another one. One of my friends. They are kind of one of my friends. People don't think enough about them. S18. Who are you, S18? You should see it during a storm. Come down here when it's a hurricane or something. Because this is built like a tank. You can actually be down here in a storm. Right. Oh, that's gross.
I never forgot that thing when I decided to cross the
train. Oh no.
I must be an idiot. You know, and it was not only me, it was carrying the bike. You know, constantly.
You were throwing the bike.
If this starts moving, I'll end up in
I'm sorry, class. I somehow ended up in Pittsburgh today. You won't be able to make it. Yeah, this is sad. How cool would it have been if there, like, with this giant structure, you could put like plants or pots or anything green on here. But you got this lame pergola that doesn't provide any shade.
No. Horrible.
But I bet they were really cheap.
I've never seen it flooded.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, it's always been below. So
Yep.
They got right.
They got the right height. Yep.
You can't imagine the money that was put in and the effort with the foundations.
Oh my gosh.
No, this went down.
Right. Hundreds of feet, right?
Hundreds of feet.
Yeah. It's such an incised river as well. I can only imagine how many. The section through this would be really cool. Thinking about like what this looked like 100 years ago over time.
Yeah, you can't imagine
how the river banks have come in. And
this was the first loft.
Oh yeah, Locust Point.
To condos. So it was not the first loft, but it was the first one that was vacant many years ago.
Oh, on the river.
Yeah. So
that was a big deal. Sure.
I almost got a place there.
Yeah, we're like anything on the water. I don't blame you. Are we going across that bridge?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We're running a bit slow, but it's okay.
This is
It's actually very nice, very powerful.
yeah, in the shade, it's very great. Far better than last week. Last Tuesday was brutal. 95 degrees. It's like 100% humidity.
No. I walked 5 blocks on Monday, in my car.
Yeah.
Rental car.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I said, no.
No.
Did the class walk was part of the?
Nope. We've never been over here as a class.
So here's where the trail arrived on some 10 years ago. And this bridge did not exist. That's where you had to sign. It's cross at your own risk.
Wow.
The other interesting thing here is that, of course, to allow the floods to enter the depression. That area sometimes is completely covered with water. And it just flows in and flows out. So again, you're designing these areas that are resilient, that know that they can take floods. Always keep that in mind. I don't know how close you are to the river in your site. Are there any areas that you're working right on the water?
Yeah.
So be very careful with that design section. You know, not only with sea level rise, but of the outflow that is coming in from the city. You're dealing with the two conditions, you know, and that is always very tricky. Because you try to defend yourself, elevating them, but as soon as you elevate them, you know, you're blocking the flows coming from inland. So that is always a tricky thing how you do it. Not asking for the New Orleans. Yeah.
Or picking up someone along the way. Weird seeing you here.
Live streamer.
Live streamer. Here we are.
Oh, it's working great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we had an equipment, so we were able to use this, but no one had an old iPhone. And we were able to plug my microphone into
Into the phone,
Into the
but
Oh, it's crystal clear.
that is
everything's
wonderful.
good.
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
I heard like your vape pen joke. I heard like,
I want a Chinese dinner.
Yeah.
Collective dinner.
After this,
After this walking
my
tour.
vape pen joke and the USB joke too.
and like you're like, oh, Chesson. Oh, Willow.
Yeah, I was just pointing something out, you know. Gotta show up. Show the trees. There they are over there, the babies. Penn Park, that's where we were. Coming back. Every bridge is different.
David, how much does a bridge like this cost?
It's really the investment for something so simple like this, because the structure is very simple.
Yeah,
And you know, you're not only for pedestrians.
yeah. So like 2 million.
Maybe even less. Yeah. Compared to the benefits that the city gets out of this, it's ridiculous.
This is such a great spot because everyone looks over the.
Keith would hate it though.
Well,
Hey.
so again, you had some interesting situations. Well, the rail was always there, and then you had the port, but you had these variances between the rail and the first street wall where the cars are parked. And of course, there are moments that it expands. So some areas like the following lot that's behind the trees were industrial land, and they kept in private hands, and now there's condos. Some areas were bought by the city after the industry moved out, and that's why you have these spaces for the parks. Look at it. That's part of the great industrial landscape, living landscape.
Love the forest growing in between too, with Penn Park. Oh, quite muddy. Someone didn't think about grading. The asphalt is squishy, he said. David, I want to hear this section. Hear it. I want to hear it.
They've been filming for the past several weeks an M. Night Shyamalan TV show in Fiddler Square.
No way.
So there's like a fake,
What are they filming?
an M. Night Shyamalan TV show.
Really?
in Fiddler.
Whoa.
So there's for like the past probably 2 months, there have been like fake encampments and like the fountain in the middle, they've like lined with fake plants. And,
Wow.
like they've been changing the street lamps.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like a whole scene. Like,
It's a rural landscapes.
It really is.
no, but it's also like
I remember they
super-
re-grassed the whole thing and had security guards like making sure people didn't walk on the
It's a
grass.
super heavy lift too, because
Yeah.
like they have wires going to
My
lights
gosh.
and like
Are we gonna see Fiddler Square, David?
Yep.
Nice. David, my bad. My middle name's David, so. Should we dunk?
Um, So we're coming to our first encounter with typology, urban typology 8. Street walls, plazas, street alignments, and so on. I have, well, I think this is very special about Philadelphia. The grid, as I mentioned in previous classes, has been used as a device to create cities, especially by imperial powers and their colonies, because it's like a military operation. Bam, 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 very easy. Yeah. And grids are different sizes, from this type of urban grid to territorial grids like in the Midwest in the United States. It's very simple. In Philadelphia, like for instance, if you see the Spanish grid, the colonial Spanish grid, it's about 100 meters by 110 meters. The Philadelphia grid is not necessarily square. Some 170 meters, 60 meters by 120. It varies. Now, the problem is that when you have a grid that is 110 meters by 110 meters, is that let's say that you have an entrance of a house there, the lots tend to be very thin, very narrow to the street, and like drains, deep. But then you have homes that are 50 meters deep. So you have front of lot, back of lot, back of lot, front of lot, and you have these elevated. So you have to resolve it with inner patios, because if not, you don't have ventilation. Are we okay? Now, in Philadelphia, William Penn had a very clever idea. He said, we create the grid. The main grid is continuous. That is, you can walk on Walnut Street from one river to the other and continue towards the university. You can walk on 13th Street in a northwest direction, and more or less you can walk for miles. In North Philly, the grid changes, but they're completely continuous. That is the main grid. But what is the clever idea? You take this main grid, and this is where usually, not in this area that is so residential, but as we move into the cities where the traffic lights are now, and you subdivide the block with the mid blocks. So this thing is a mid block, and the mid block could be like that. It could be very narrow alleys. It could be in T's. It could be discontinuous. It can run for 2 blocks and that's it. But usually, if you go through the mid block, as you see, people are using it to enter their homes at the mid block, and that allows the lots to be much smaller. The other thing is that in the mid block, since it's not continuous, you only have local traffic. You don't use it to go through the city. So what I try to say with this, and I think it's a very beautiful device, is that the grid allows for urban and metropolitan continuity. The subgrid creates these villages, like in the middle of the block. And this is something that I would like to do some research on. I can't prove it 100%, but as you would notice, in the mid block, and we're going to go through one of these beautiful streets, Panama Street, you get the lots that are very small. And they're lots that are about 4 meters by 4 meters. They're tiny, 4.5 meters. That is like the lot in most informal settlements, or in the Chinese villages. They're very small. And what you do is that you grow up. And that is the famous Trinity House. So you have a ground floor, where you have the entrance, and you have a living area. You usually would have the kitchen in the basement. Then you have first floor, a main bedroom with the only bathroom, and then you have the top floor for the kids. And that is the Trinity House. So it's vertical. So it's hot. It's more vertical than horizontal. What I'm trying to say is that it's a way to densify the blocks. And here's where my clever research is, but I don't know. I have to prove it. And you will see it, is that these smaller lots in the middle of the block tended to be workers' tenements. The outer edge has larger lots, and therefore the income was higher. And this is what I have to prove. It is a very clever device to mix income within the same block, because usually cities make a big effort to stratify their income. You know, the rich don't want to live with the poor. But if you find a typology in a block where you're creating a mixed block for different income, that is very clever. And I don't know if it was an accident, but that is what occurred. And you will see many examples where you have bigger mansions in the outer ring, and then you have the workers' quarters inside all these mini villages. Nice, smart. And when you start making sections, and start having an idea, you know, as you walk, your step is what, 1 meter, 3 feet, maybe a little under 3 feet, to get an idea, for instance, of the width of the residential block from the front to back. And then you have, in this case, parking lot, you have a mini backyard. So that is front of lot, back of lot, back of lot, front of lot with parking. One facing the plaza, one facing a street with the garages.
Is this an alley then?
That's it, yeah. So this, and we don't know if it's a.
We can find out.
At the same time, it might be a collective alley.
It goes a few houses in. Oh, that's a nice backyard. Columnal oaks, not looking happy. Oh, trash picking up. Where are you guys?
Wow, this is 3 meters 25. Nothing to width.
Look how cute this street is. Oh, I'm verklempt.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. You have
Cinco.
about 4 meters. 13 feet, more or less. And then on top of it, you have the trees that narrow even further the section. Wow. I guess, you know, they're grids all over the world. For me, this is every time you find these alleys in Philly, this is the emblematic image of Philadelphia. These very inner block villages. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, you
Look at that little tiny.
does anybody know what these
Is
things
that
are?
a through?
What are they
Throughway?
for? Through to where? To where?
Back to the house.
Okay, this is what happens. You will see it there are many places, and notice that it's located in the dividing line between two properties. So you have a mini lot of acidity house there, and you have another one there. So I'm gonna use you as one house. Okay, so this is the LA. Okay, you're facing me. You're this house. Okay, you are facing that way. Okay, and you are facing here. So this door is there. Okay, that's what that thing is. Okay, and the top touch, and then this alley goes there and allows to enter that house from here.
What?
So this is an incredible urban design trick, not only to densify the mid block, but to again re-densify and have a second house there. Now, two things can happen. One is to be bottom against bottom like this. The other way is to do this, and you separate, and you have a little patio here that is shared between this house and this house. But you have the little alley to get this. Okay, now what has happened over time, A, is that these LAs are rather thin. You know, people want to obese at the time. Now you have to sort of go in like an Egyptian. Second, the homes are quite small, the footprint, and has happened is most of these homes, most of them, not all, they've collated the homes. So although they knocked down part of the wall and they integrated a real living room, or they have the main house in front and then they have dorms, rooms in the rear house, and you just go from the main house to the rear house to the open patio. But most of them are closed, and that's why they're sealed. But legally, it's not. It's like common ground. You can't take the integrated to none of the homes because it's in the dividing line. Interesting.
Yeah.
Aha. Yeah.
Yeah, another one.
Aha. Some of them. Hey, here, as you look into this one, have an idea. This one has a grate on it, and you can see how narrow it is, and you see light in the back.
It also smells terrible.
Hey, here you have something that must have been maybe modified, we don't know, but this is the idea in full force. So you have, and look what happens even with the numbers, you have a half and a half, referring to the back house.
This curb is janky.
Nice.
I want it. Look at all that green space. Oh, with a,
Now, of course, had you gone to 10, 20 years ago, you would have bought these homes for
$20,000, $2. What is investment anyway? Oh, this is the M. Night Shyamalan set. Can we walk through? All right, cool. LOL. So it's a fake encampment. I like the fake encampment.
one of the things that you just coming to Philly, but for those that have been here for 10, for 20 years, is that the economy of the city is coming back to life gradually. We've been gaining population. There's about another 300,000 people in the last 20 years. So things are coming back to life. What you will find in almost all the neighborhoods, Center City is quite filled in again, is that there were so many voids when we had the population loss in the 1950s and 60s, that the city is full of vacancies, especially when you move to South Philly and to North Philly. The entire area sort of bombed out. Gradually, the city is filling in, whether it is occupying the vacancies or recycling and improving the building stock. The thing that, for the most part, I find very interesting is that compared to cities like, say, Boston, where there are huge real estate operations, huge chunks, like in South Philly, that were occupying. In Philly, the operations to be more piecemeal, of a smaller scale. And that allows smaller developments and smaller investments, and you're keeping sort of the character of what the neighborhoods are. There are a zillion examples of contemporary architecture in traditional neighborhoods, and especially those that live in Northern Liberties. We've seen it happen. That it's all good. It is good because the urban fabric is pulling together. There are bad effects. Land values go up, taxes go up. Most of the traditional residents cannot afford, even if they own the home, they can't afford the taxes, especially if they're younger and they're not working. The city is producing tax abatements in many areas. If you demonstrate that you live in the area for more than 10 years, then your taxes are significantly lower than someone who just moved in, and that is helping a bit. But one of the indicators that you see is that there was a moment in the early 1900s where there were more than 900 churches in the city. It was a city of neighborhoods. It was one of the biggest cities in the world, made of, not a monumental city, because other than Market and Broad and the Ben Franklin Diagonal, it is the grid. So the grids kept on growing and creating new neighborhoods with churches and schools. It was in the city of neighborhoods. Well, you could tell that many of these churches that were active, used by the communities, predominantly African Americans, in the last 15 years, the communities had to move out. They could not afford the taxes. And of course, as the communities moved out to the outer edge, there was not a congregation to support the churches. They have to give them up. We see many of the churches have been demolished and turned into condominiums. So you start seeing these. Now, the good trend is that the city is the teeth are being rebuilt. The problem is social displacement. And that is another topic for those that are interested in counteracting gentrification. There are not that many. This is Footloose Square. I think it's a very beautiful scale that is not Rittenhouse Square. These are obviously community squares. You would find, well, this is and whatever, but you usually see residents. There's a farmers market.
Bears.
In general, this is the type of space that Jane Jacobs takes on. Okay, because you have the public church, then you have the street, and then you have eyes on the city. That is all the edges looking at us.
All the
But look at this guy. This probably was not an open space. This was probably occupied by homes that face that street, like, you know, the continuation of Panama Street, and then this was a back alley, and then there were homes that face that. So those things probably the city must have boarded out in these times of neglect. There were so many abandoned homes, and they created a park. Okay, here you have an interesting condition in which you have the rear of the homes with secondary access and sometimes the parking lot. So notice that these guys have the beautiful deck. I would also have the deck over. Okay, so I mean, so you don't have to be dogmatic. In theory, you should not turn your back to the public space. You should look at it. And that is eyes of the city. Here we have an example of a beautiful space where three of the edges are more conventional, and then you have the rear. But still, from those windows, if there's something going on here and someone screams at night, immediately you have a neighbor that says something's going on. Okay? And that's very important for you guys. Again, there are societies that are very safe. There are areas there you have to be very aware of the level of safety. You know, and this type of sexual relation and the type of uses around it is extremely important. If these things, instead of being residents, would be office spaces that close at 5 o'clock, you don't know if at night you would be here. Okay.
Oh, they're fake flowers. To me, they're fake. Hey, good morning. Ooh, back alleys. Woo.
It's a weird combination of back alleys with the parking lots.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you have front of house.
Yep. None of them really make sense. But I think that kind of shows how organic this city, as you're talking about how it was created, kind of just from neighborhoods, from people gathering together and making their space. Like, and how different these types of buildings are. Like, what?
Design, but okay, but
But like, look, like
scale
across from it, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the scale's great, but
And this must have been some
brand
sort
new,
of
yeah.
parking thing.
Exactly. Big windows. Oh, look at that roof deck up there. Woo. Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's what I look on all the plans.
Yep. Oh, wow. Watch out. Bike lane.
Yeah, this was a parking lot converted into a school.
This was a parking lot and it turned into a school. A really good school too. How's it going? Oh, lantana hunt.
I've never seen it translate.
Look how small this Acer palmatum leaves are. What? Look at the hanging pots they have.
Whoa.
Very nice.
Okay, here is where my theory starts working.
Tell us
Apart-
more.
apart of it.
That's big.
So look at this house. You know, so you have these main streets that then have cafes. You know, you're selling your product, a real estate product, and then you go to the side alley and you have the Trinity homes.
Yeah.
You know, combined. This is amazing. There are some, again, nothing doesn't matter. This is the Lancey Street. This is a mid block, and
Watch out.
watch out. Okay, now in this case, you have the mid block of the small alley with the Trinity home, but sometimes you have a mid block like the Lancey, which is a rather fancy street, which larger lots. And what you will see is that with the same name of the Lanceys, you go from one block to another in the main grid, and then boom, you hit the facade of a building and you move a few meters to the left or to the right. So what you're producing is discontinuity of the alignment, and that is creating these more residential, more private streets. So it's a very subtle environment, and many times you will see, when it's not the case here, but on the other side is that you have the homes facing the street, but then as you move, as you shift right or left, you have a house that gets the view of the street, and that tends to
Watch
be
out.
bigger and has higher value. Yes.
They have the car
You
there.
coming in? Ah,
All right.
ooh.
12 meters. 50 feet. It's a perfect street.
So, guys, these measurements in your head when you're designing street, 50 feet, general sidewalks, enough for planting, one car flow, and then you have one lane of parking. 12 meters, 50 feet.
Urban Design Studio.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an awesome street. Horses used to be here.
Yeah, by the way, these guys are not fake. Every time you see these things, it's that you are trying horses here. Does anybody know what these symbols mean? These dots?
Oh, fire department?
Yes. So, yeah, okay, you can drop out of the cost. They were the first insurance companies. You know, also, you know that traditional, and even today, it surprises many people. You know, we built with wood frame because we have pine forests, because we have cheap wood in the United States. And so throughout the history, many of the American cities have experienced severe fires. I mean, not only the Chicago fire, Boston has burnt down, Philadelphia has had fires. So obviously building in a technology that is very quick and very cheap with wooden frame and the exterior brick, and then of course you have winter. So now you have heating systems, but you had furnaces. So the risk of fire was very high. So what happened? The idea of insurance. Okay, so you were insuring your homes. These were the first insurance companies, okay, that were being insured for fire hazards.
An ash. if you're breathing.
No, no. If you had one of these plaques, meant that you were insured and the house had higher value. Okay, so and then these are the different companies. Sometimes they look like fire engines and whatever.
And if it,
No, they're not that wide either. It's 5 meters, 16 feet. But then, of course, you have the height. And, well, in some of these homes that you would have the piano nobile with dining room, living room, then you would usually have a main bedroom, usually 2 bath, children, and then usually you had servants area in the attic with a staircase from the rear. So topologies change, social values change, whatever.
you have an awesome home.
What's this for?
Cleaning your room.
How you doing, man? Nice to see you.
Does anybody speak French? There's an expression in France when you want to say good luck, you take an exam, you have an interview, you say bon mère. Literally means good shit. Which is such contradiction. You're wishing somebody good shit or good luck. And the expression comes from the horses that when the theater started being developed in France, who had access to the theater? The wealthy. And if the shows were successful, there were more people coming in their carriages to the show, and there was horse shit all over the place.
Way more shit.
So the more shit that was in front of this theater, it meant that the play was a success. So you would wish the playwright, the actress, bon merde.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this one must have been a bon merde street with all the horses and whatever, and it was also a symbol of status. So,
Next time my
and
parents,
that is why you needed that thing to clean your feet, your boots.
and in rural PA, they still got them at the Walmarts for all of the Amish and Mennonite. Yeah. It's a whole different kind of urbanism.
Whoa, and then, guys, again, so beautiful. I mean, you have the infrastructure easements like this, but then you have these almost like urban ecologies in the back alleys, creating these streams of green. So actually, it's quite a green city. Compact, quite dense, but you can green the streets and you can green the back alley, and then you have this whole idea of the forest decks. But again, we're studying typologies, and with the plots, this is the type of section you have to start drawing. Like for instance, here you have one of these corner lots, and this guy is clearly, not only the big windows in the lower level, but you have a big bay window.
Yeah.
Maybe of the master bedroom or a smoking room.
The smoking room. There you go.
Okay, so you move from the landscape, you move a little.
Oh yeah, look at that. Delancey just kind of cut. Oh, look, the police are stopping traffic for us. That's so nice. Wow, look at this street. Holy hell. Look at these windows. Oh my God. This is crazy. These are beautiful homes.
Okay, I mean, this was obviously.
Watch children.
Home. But again, the design trick of just moving the landscape a little bit to keep the through traffic from going.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for those who will know Boston or Boston, you are dealing with rather similar street configuration, but you start seeing several subtleties. Philadelphians, we are founded by Quakers. And in the Quaker religion, it's you're very austere. Even if you have money, you don't show it. So you would show the wealth inside the home, but usually the facade is very subtle. If you go to Boston, get all the big windows, and there's more of a luxurious feeling of the outer areas, go to the back bay, to the south end, whatever. But obviously, these are rich homes with that same typology. Piano nobile, main bedrooms, smaller bedrooms, servants' quarter. That's a typology. But the facades, you see, are very, very simple. The unity, the heights are the same. The street alignment is exactly the same. You're dealing, of course, with the furnaces below, and therefore the homes have risen. This is also for many people coming from tropical areas. They're not used to having basements. So why the hell do Americans have basements? Because it's not because it's flooding. It's because you have the furnaces down in the basement. And then that also creates a motif because you need to solve the grade difference, the piano nobile. The other advantage of this piano nobile elevated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is that only a few of us can look into somebody's home. You know, you have a sense of privacy. So you're dealing with, with the great residential areas right on the street. There's the stigma in many countries that you don't live in the ground floor because it's public and whatever, you want to be elevated and detached. Well, this is a very easy sectional device to be able to deal with that. Cool. Okay.
You know you're doing well when you have a dog statue.
So here we have two different elements on the facade.
1752. Yeah.
1752. They're all in. What's up? What's up?
Car.
You have the insurance companies, and then you have these stars. Do you know what the stars are? For what? Right. So eventually the facade starts failing. So these things are reinforced, and the bolt is keeping the facade up. So if you're going to buy a home and it's full of star bolts, we check it out. Bring an engineer and say, was this done correctly, or are you buying lemon?
Lemonade, baby. Lemonade. These are some nice trees too. Really.
Well, and of course, with a narrow section, look at the beauty of it.
Oh, sexy.
Oh, and of course the trees are seeking the light, so the trunks go up and then they open.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Real sycamores, not even London planes too.
Fantastic. How are the offshore students doing?
They said they're having fun.
Sorry, I can't see you guys, but they say it's clear.
Yeah, they say we're having a good time. Apparently we're fun.
Hey, you have to thank Lila a billion times because this was 4 hours planning to make this happen. And also this colleague, Asarai,
Yeah.
who's been admitted to the program.
Uh-huh.
She was the one that came up with
Nice.
this. She's been training us for the last week.
Yeah, it's all working out.
And it just happens as Asarai says, I can't accompany you because she's now in Mexico City getting her visa from the American Embassy just this morning. So,
Wow. Everyone's coming back, baby. Things are coming back. We're going to party soon. David's going to be there. Don't you worry.
well, there's a tradition for those that are in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
I can't have everybody because they don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of my studios, there's usually end of the semester party in my
Ooh.
house. But the voice gets
Oh.
around, so people from other studios come.
Oh, okay.
We usually have about 80 people.
No way. In your
The
yard?
last time we had a party was just before the spring break that led to COVID.
Right.
And everybody
Right,
was
March.
drinking out of and that was it.
That was the beginning
That
of
was the
COVID with your
beginning.
backyard. Yeah. I live in a really nice block as well. There's a little park right behind my house.
Where is it?
45th and Locust. Now everyone on live stream knows. Yeah, and there's some backyards and a little park right in the middle. It was an old construction remnant that they turned into a bird sanctuary.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's a really nice party
Whoa,
space.
Whoa.
Whoa, look at this. All of a sudden someone built something different. God forbid you have windows.
Well, there's something different that is good, and there's something different that is quite hideous.
Something different, that's good. Something different, that's hideous.
Okay, you will be, guys, this is very important. So obviously, as we start moving toward center city, we start seeing that there's a change in the building typology. This is 1960s, 70s. And I don't know if you know who Ed Bacon is, but Ed Bacon was a planner for the city of Philadelphia that was in City Hall about 22 years or so. They would change the administration, different mayors, but he was so committed to make a change in the city that the different administrations kept him on the job. There's a book that became seminal in city planning and urban design, which is Design of Cities by Edmund Bacon. And he had the hot potato of dealing with the city in the economic downfall after the 50s. I mean, people are leaving the city. The economy is in shambles. And hey, hi. Oh, good. This is Professor Annette Fierro.
Hello.
Architecture.
Lucky. You heard him in the streets.
Hi, I miss you.
I know, amazing.
These are my last, wait, this is fantastic. These are those that are physically here. And then we have another 15 or 20 that live streaming in China.
Oh, my God.
Hello, this is Professor Annette Fierro from Architecture. This is what?
600.
600.
Yeah.
Oh, welcome
So
back.
I can see them and touch them.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah.
Where are you?
I'm right here.
I've never been invited to this new house. I know where you live.
No, we'll be back.
What do you want to know about the block?
So, well, can you say something? Are you happy? What do you say to me about this?
This is a really interesting urban morphology, right? Because this was all developed in the 1890s, right? And the way that this plan is that block, the 2000 block, and the 1800 block is a very, very fancy house. They're like 6,000 square foot houses. They're enormous, right?
Delancey.
Yeah, Delancey, fancy Delancey, right?
Fancy Delancey.
These blocks, and note that it doesn't align, it sets in, right? Because these fancy people don't want people driving right through.
I got it right.
Yeah. He's not lying to
But
us.
also, the properties get smaller, and this was the block for stables.
Oh, that we did not know.
Oh, new.
So you see that there's a lot of garages that were changed from stables into, and this is the back of Spruce then, right? Yeah.
Brilliant. You see why you have to speak to the locals?
Exactly. The locals know the deeds.
Very clever thing, right? They adjusted the street pattern and then they adjusted the properties. So this used to be, even like 10 years ago, this was an inn with an old sign that was abandoned for years.
Thank you, Professor. Do you have something to say?
I will let you continue.
All right.
Thank you. Nice
Bye.
to meet you. Miss you.
Bye, guys. Bye.
So this was the stables, and they got renovated. So this is where the servants stayed then. You don't believe it?
You're doing great work. I wouldn't have been able to do this.
It's a lot, but we're having fun. We're having a good time. I've always thought about live streaming my entire life, so
Yeah, this is good practice.
I got to become an influencer, right? God damn it! No one heard that. A lot of ginkgos on this street. Big ginkgo mood when they were putting trees in. Oh, that's a cool house.
Like,
Yeah, they do look pretty cool. Kind of dinosaur-y, really tall and thin.
like speckly.
Yeah, yeah. Quality of shade's rather nice too.
Okay, guys, again, it's interesting. Of course, contemporary living. Many families would say, I will not move into a place where they don't have a car because I need a car.
Right.
Okay, so how do you design cars? One is to incorporate them in parking lots there. But then this is what happens. You know, this is not, because I think we all like this is that better than this one on all the ground planes. But it's okay. Okay. But it's okay. It's okay. And then you can have solutions. You can have pockets like this, that can be public. You can have better pavement. You can have it under shade of trees. So there are ways to dealing with collective parking and still have a pedestrian-friendly environment. So keep that in mind. That's always going to be a design problem.
Yeah.
You will see that in many low-income communities, especially in the developing world, you have these tiny lots, 4 meters wide, maybe 10 meters deep, 30 meters deep. That gives 120 meters, which is rather flexible. And you have 2 stories, 3 stories. You have 300 square meters of construction. That's a rather big home. And what they do is that they have the setback for a car. So you have these tiny homes, and then the front of the lot is a parking lot. And of course, since the area said if you leave a car unattended, they steal it, they cover them and they invent. So you end up having entire streets that are not amicable, they're not planted, that are the entrance to garages. So that's going to be a major design thing, is what do you do with the vehicles? So many things can happen. It can happen like this, or it could happen, which is the Boston solution. Have you been in the Back Bay in Boston? If not, you should go. You have the amicable facade facing the street, and then you have a service alley behind where you have all the other things, the dumpsters, the garages, the old bikes, and whatever. So that's another solution. You have a service street
Yeah.
to the back, and then you have the clean facade to the front.
Mhm. I like the solution of the garage with the garden on top too. Right here, that one.
Ah, beautiful. Not bad.
Yeah,
Not bad.
strange. And also this parking lot has trees around it, so it's all in shade too.
Look at that.
It's beautiful. You can tell it's a rich old street. And hat boxes. Someone's buying fancy hats.
Our library at Ryerson was designed by the very well-known architect Furness.
Frank.
Frank Furness. This is a Furness building, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So he.
Oh yeah. Frank Furness, our boy Frankie, designed the library, right? The Fine Arts Library, designed Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts too. Oh, I see trees. And it's smell of trash. You guys can't smell that, but it's pretty horrendous. Garbage truck just went by. Oh, and look, there's a vape pen again in the distance. Ta-da!
Okay. I mean, people that love cities, that study cities, like Professor David Graham saying that I have to look into his book, Recombinant Urbanism and Urban Design, since 1945 to the present, tend to reduce or try to analyze, reduce the complexities of cities to basic organizational forms, to diagrams, to patterns. So that happens with everybody that is really interested in cities. There is someone who won the National French Urbanism Prize by name of Philippe Paneret. And in Paneret's work, he says that the main components of city fabric are the following. He says, le tracé, which translates very poorly because le tracé is the grid, the urban trace. Now, in English, there's a problem with the grid because it sounds like a Cartesian grid, but it is essentially how you draw the street pattern that separates public from private. So you can have a medieval tracé or you can have a Cartesian. So that's his first component. The second one he says is le parcellaire, the parcel, the lot. How after you design the grid that defines public from private, you have the block and you subdivide the block. So how do you subdivide it? in mini lots, like for the Trinity House, or you take the block and you say that is a lot and that is a lot. So you're already defining a footprint by the lot subdivision. Are we okay? So tracé parcellaire. And the final thing he says is la typologie, the building typology of how you build it. So let's say that you have a lot that is that, but this could have been a 2 stories full or whatever. No, there's a change in the zoning and you have a typology that has elevator use, whatever, there's densification. So you have a building typology that is changed in morphology, in the heights and the uses. So always keep that in mind. What is the general grid configuration? How the lots are subdivided, and what is the typology built on them? And what are the forces behind them? So for instance, if you're again in a city like Philadelphia, you tend to have this smaller piecemeal development. If you're in contemporary cities in China, you have huge grids. You have the mega blocks, which sometimes you have 400 meters from one quarter to the other, the mega blocks. And then you have these huge, it's a single lot where you have done by one operation, real estate operation at the time. Boom, it's not piecemeal. And then you have a building typology, which many times are very high extruded things. So, well, those are the components that you're working with, okay? Now, let me go back to the story of Mr. Ed Bacon. He becomes a city planner in a moment where the city is going down the drain. So he only has problems. The city is losing population. Businesses are going broke. It's worse than the pandemic. Homeless everywhere. Crime has risen. People are leaving their homes, their mansions, even like those, and they're moving to the suburbs to have 5 cars and 7 dogs and whatever. And that is when this guy is city planning of this. And then he realized, which you also know, that it built into the codes of the city is a height regulation that nothing could surpass the height of City Hall. That was built in the building plan. And then he realized that in the 1960s, there was a change in the economy, global economy. You're getting financial corporations, banking, insurance companies that need very big footprints in their offices. And many times it's not only one floor. Their offices that has 20 floors. And where they're going to New York. And we cannot compete. So Bacon decides to change the zoning code and allow for vertical development in the entire urban turf. The entire county of Philadelphia grid could be vertical development. In order to do that, to the vertical, look at that, the WS whatever building with the white thing of the 1960s. And in order to do that, you could build high, which is great for the corporation, but you needed a minimum lot size in order to get a building there, because you have elevators, you have parking lot or whatever. So he said minimum lot size, whatever, 2,000 square meters, multiplied by 10 for feet. And that started changing the morphology of the city. And of course, who were able to buy these big lots? People that had cash. Because in order to take advantage of the vertical zoning and the floor area ratio, you had to assemble lots. So you had people with cash that were able to buy 10 lots, assemble them to take advantage of the vertical development. The only problem is the bad I told. Baker is saying, how do I attract investment? The banks, the insurance company, because before the city really dies. The only thing that I think was a big mistake is that he expanded this new zoning throughout the entire area. And he is following modernist principles. And the modernists go back to Le Corbusier. What is one of the things that Le Corbusier saying in the 1920s? That the traditional city is intrinsically sick, is dead. It has a cancer. So it could be demolished. Okay? So Bacon was following modernist ideas that the city could be revitalized to meet the new demands of technology, of economy, and therefore the traditional fabric. And what did you start seeing? When you look at it in Society Hill, you started having a tower there, a tower 20 blocks away. You started having these candles popping up in different areas. Now, look how crazy this is. If you change the zone for the entire city, potentially, maybe there could have been a population of 40 million people. Because everything could be densified, which obviously is not the case. You see, it started having the disruption of the urban fabric in different areas. And they started demolishing homes that were around for 300 years while we develop the land, these vacant lots that you have assembled can be used for sufficient parking lot. So what are you getting? Entire areas are being demolished. All homes that are disappearing, the fabric is disintegrating, and you start having the city full of void, full of parking lots. Nice. At some point, Philadelphia said, "We love you, Bacon. We know you're trying to do something for our city, but this change in the zoning is completely insane. Reconsider it." Another thing that happened. I don't know how many of you have made it to New York, but you've arrived to Penn Station, right? By train, you know where Penn Station is, which is below Madison Square Garden. Penn Station was, you say, why am I jumping to New York? Penn Station was the most beautiful train station of the United States and one of the biggest and most beautiful in the world. It was like metalwork, whatever. I remember I was about 4 years old. I was visiting my grandparents in New York, and I could not really understand the commotion that my grandparents and my parents were in this protest with pots and pans trying to stop the demolition of Penn Station. And Jane Jacobs was there. You are completely crazy. How are we going to lose the station to build a stupid Madison Square Garden and whatever? Of course, we lost. They lost. No, and the station came down. Why do I say this? The demolition of Penn Station. Sorry. Hey, look at these guys. Beautiful. They are as happy as we are to be out. So the demolition of Penn Station triggered the historic preservation movement in the United States. Right? And that has a repercussion here because a lot of the communities that were very concerned of the demolitions that Ed Bacon's zoning was causing to what used to be the capital of the United States, which is history, said reconsider your zoning. And that is why zoning code was rewritten that allowed for the redensification of the zone of Center City for the Corbusian office dream, which is that, and areas, enormous areas like Society Hill went back to the historic preservation code, but they had demolished so much of it already with all these vacancies that then it was historic preservation / controlled architecture. And you will see a zillion examples if we make it to Society Hill today, where you have contemporary architecture meeting the scale of the traditional, and they're not romantic historic reproduction. There's contemporary architecture dealing with street alignment, scale, materials, proportions, a bunch of things that were built into the scale. And this is how Philadelphia became one of the first cities where you got contemporary architecture within historic districts. Cool. This is part of understanding what a city is all about. Now, what you clearly see, like for instance, when you take a look at this block, and what you see at the end is, of course, Rittenhouse Square. Most of you have been there 100 times. It's one of the 4 foundation squares of the city. And you see that there was a change in the zoning to create a street wall. Look at the height of the last building that rings Rittenhouse Square. But the original scale of Rittenhouse Square was 3 4-story walk-ups. So what you get in the city, you get remnants of the original fabric and the original lot size, and then you have an integration of lots that allow for the vertical development. So as a result, look at the street wall. Look at this corner, the service. This is an intermediate code before Bacon, when that was the maximum height that you could build under the statue of William Penn. That, with a W, is already the Ed Bacon code that you could go way above the height. So every time you see, look at these guys, the developers, they say, well, what is the maximum height that we can develop within the old code? Are we okay?
Yeah.
Fine. And then you will find cities, like if you go to Paris, the Haussmannian city is very even. It's 5, 6 stories with the attics. If you go to Tokyo, other than the big skyscrapers, why? Because the lots are very small, and the height is controlled to get to 6 stories. Why? Because although it's one of the most expensive real estates in the world, Tokyo shakes every day. So the skyscrapers need very strong foundations and whatever. In Tokyo, you will also find that a lot. This is a lot here. You will find that the building is here, and you have a void of about 30 centimeters with a metal plaque. Why? Because again, they're giving space for the buildings to vibrate during a quake and not to push each other. So this, what I'm trying to say is that there's some cities like Barcelona in the huge grid with those cut off corners, Tokyo, Paris, that are very homogeneous in the height of the fabric. And there are cities where some areas are very homogeneous, like South Philly, West Philly, North Philly, and then you come to the center of the city, and then you register all these variations over time. Hey, you know, I was here on the bike, I am very jealous of the old, and I found a phone, orange one, smushed in there, and I found this around the corner, and you know, the Good Samaritan, I put that in, and it lasted one day. Okay, so,
So City Hall has William Penn on top of it, big bronze sculpture. Used to be a city ordinance that you couldn't build higher than his hat, in case you didn't catch that. And then that was taken away. All of these buildings started to come, start tearing down things, and have a new urban fabric. Philadelphia is all this now.
despite the fact of being the first capital of the United States and the architectural richness of the city and the history, the zoning code, other than areas like Society Hill, is still quite flexible. So you see a process of re-densification. And one of the interesting things is that again, in the 1970s, the area was depopulated. And if an area depopulates, of course, it harms the commerce and it goes dead at night. So you want people living in cities. So the whole idea that re-densification allows for more people living in central cities is not a bad idea. Now, I went on a bike ride a few weeks ago, and for those that of course have not been in previous years, two things I noticed. The amount of commerce that did not survive COVID. There are many restaurants and many shops that went dead. You don't know if they'll gradually come back. But then you have the other side of the coin. As the small businesses go broke, then heavy bucks are buying up entire blocks. I found about 5 or 6 entire blocks that came down that used to be many individual lots, and the developers are buying them to gentrify the area. And that is going to exacerbate social differences in the city. It's very sad. And that is just the effect of a year and a half of COVID. I'll show you some of these sites as we move around. On the other hand, you have the center city where you can walk without being mugged. And that was not the case in the 1960s, in the Philadelphia time. Okay, so where is the balance between activity, safe streets, amicable streets, vibrancy versus gentrification and displacement? It's difficult. Yeah. The bike lanes, the redesign of the section for the bike lanes is a phenomena that has grown in the
Last 10 years, but people still park in them.
So we're moving ahead.
We're moving, we're learning. One of the other crazy things in the last year and a half is how much space restaurants have taken. All of that space that they're not going to be given back
No,
anytime
I
soon.
hope not. I hope not.
No, I don't
I mean,
think they are.
this is a great phenomenon.
Yep.
No,
We got to hold on to it.
streets are for people, not for cars.
Exactly. And I really think people like it too. And the restaurants invested so much money into it, they're not going to be giving it up.
Hey, by the way, you see this phenomenon in cities like also like in New York, but the New York grid, as you know, is much wider, and the intensity of traffic is tremendous. And it was not always that fun. It's not always that fun to sit out in New York with all the traffic. The Philly grid is rather tight. So this type of restaurants with the tables out on the sidewalks happened way before COVID. So this is something that is an addition, a COVID response to something that was already there. I think it's.
Is your prediction that these will last?
Yes, I think so. I don't think they will return. And there's a lot of movement for this. There are many cities, even cities that are not very progressive, like Lima in Peru, others that are progressive, like Barcelona in Spain, where the entire lane. Pedestrian friendly and bike friendly, that you can provide. And that will never go back.
COVID restaurants. Let's go. What is up with all these? What? Facade pieces, fountain heads, maybe? Oh. Coming up on Rittenhouse Square, one of the original 4 blocks of Philadelphia. Bright View Landscaping's here. How surprising. The best commercial landscape company since 1939. I strongly disagree. Oh, these are pretty.
So if you guys will quickly sketch what Rittenhouse Square is all about. So I guess you will first try to establish relations between the grid and how the streets relate to the square. And what you will see, that is Walnut, right? The same street that goes by Myerson. So you have a continuous alignment. But then you see that all the other streets are a boom, you come against the street wall. Or this, boom, this mid block ends. And then that street, which is what, 18th maybe? That is also one of the continuous William Penn streets. So you have 2 streets that are continuous, and then you have these side streets that die on the square. And that gives it a lot of character. Then you have the general framework of the buildings. This was, again, the maximum height of the free vacant regulation. And then you have buildings like this one, that is the post-vacant regulation. For instance, notice the subtlety of typology. There you have the traditional grid, similar to the homes that we saw in the Lansing Street, in the side street. And then you have a change in the lot size and of the typology, 1950s. And what do you have here? Look at the people on the sidewalk, this couple walking. And then you have a covered arcade. And then you have the lobby of the building with no shops. What I'm trying to say is that a city fabric changes and becomes diverse and tolerates new typologies. The problem is, again, balance. What would happen if all the street walls of Center City, Philadelphia were converted into a building of pilotis with private lobbies? You would probably change completely the activity of the city.
No more eyes.
You would know we have no eyes in the city. You would kill street activity. So again, when do you accept this type of changes until it becomes a problem? So for instance, Famous Park Restaurant, the idea that you have restaurants with comments, with people taking over the street,
Bunch of
or
restaurants.
even that, look at this thing here. This, I don't know if it's a condo or a hotel. You see the facade starts moving back, and there's a drop off for a ramp for cars, like it was a hotel. What if everybody did that? You would be destroying the street light. And will be examples of that are even worse, with complete hostile relation of the building in relation to the street. Okay, again, the eternal example. Hi. Hola. If you try to understand the design of Rittenhouse Square proper, you will again see what is the tracé, the path, how it works. And of course, you have the diagonal, you have the internal circle, you have secondary paths, And that is the mobility system. So that is one layer of activity. And then you have the planting scheme. And you have areas that align the diagonal with that, with heavy planting, or the circle, or the edge. And then you have patches where you have the lawn. So you have another layer. And then you have the programming, where you have the seating area, where you have the gazebo, and so on. And then, of course, in relation to the mobility system, is that you have a more active the homeless and that on that side. We have the public transportation coming, and then you have a more family-oriented thing, like what is the residential area. So then you have the influence of the entourage, of the ensemble over the place. So again, when you look at places like this and you say, yeah, it's part of the city, of the history. I mean, I think any Philadelphian or anyone would be very angry if they decided to convert this into a parking lot. What do we learn of a traditional place like this? Not to repeat it, but to use it as references for our contemporary design. If you were given hypothetically the idea of, let's say that there was an explosion, you know, or you were creating another plaza like this in contemporary terms, what would you do? What would your general organization do? What is your reference? So you're dealing with context. You're dealing with who the users are, but you're also trying to invent an aesthetic that represents your time. You're probably dealing with water management and with climate change, or you're deciding what type of activity there is. Or is it sport oriented? Are there festivals? Or for instance, this square has maybe 20 major events. I don't know if you've been to any of the art shows here or the craft shows. They align all the plaza with stands that they rent for the art shows, for the craft shows. You know, there's even a stupid dog carnival. The only Americans with this type of but all that happens here. So programming of events related to the culture. Now, what do you do in a formal organization? What is your palette? I think these are questions that you're gonna have to ask yourself. But what is your legacy? And what do we learn from the existing places? So how would you design a fifth foundation square for Philadelphia? That could be a short studio exercise.
Totally.
That's for contemporary urbanism 2000.
2022. Create a fifth square. That's unlike anything you've seen before. Brand new. Social infrastructure, habitat restoration.
Platform for that's a good one.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Brennan House is commonly voted one of the best parks in the country too.
That's very, and the maintenance is fantastic.
The maintenance is incredible. Come here on a Friday night, so many hinge dates along.
So many things are
So
happening.
many dates.
So many things are happening.
So many people using it.
You know, they're lovers, they're kids,
Yes,
they're business people,
musicians.
they're doing drugs.
Yes.
Everything is happening.
The smell of weed is in the air. Create parks just for that. Yeah. It's a good way to support arts. Oh, someone painting. Oh, you're good. Have fun. Beautiful people riding skateboards.
It is a very beautiful park, and all this thing with the restaurants, I think.
Yep. Yep. They just need to close down that street though. It's not fun to drive on.
No.
They should just extend the park into that street. $9.51.
Not bad.
Almost 10. Oh, they got something. There's a farmer's market today?
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea it was on the. What's today? Tuesday? There's Tuesday farmers markets here? That's exciting.
Not huge, but it's something.
That's something. There's bigger ones on the weekends here.
You need a break from that at all? Let me know.
Jackson will be taking over soon. My phone is almost dead. Yeah, I figure at 10 o'clock, what's halfway?
I don't know. I'm down.
My phone's at like 40%. I have to leave at noon as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure how long this is going.
Apologies. And that's the wedding.
So many interesting people. People reading everywhere. Double restaurants. Oh. What are these? Oh, are they moving? I think they're moving it. That's a strange way to move it, though. There's so many. I think there's a.
This really funny technique that fixed meetings about these. It was like someone was like imagining themselves like
No way. Imagine it gives people the opportunity to build something
So
themselves.
again, with this idea of how cities transform, probably in the late 1700s, look at the house in the middle of the block. This probably was a street very similar to Panama Street, where you had the mid-block residential. But obviously, as this became the heart of, and look at the type of residential area that you had. Now, as the area starts changing and it becomes a commercial hub of the city, and the Ed Bacon zoning changes, well, it is a commercial, essentially a commercial area. There's hotels, there's shops, there's restaurants. So what do? You transform the alley that was a residential street in a service alley. So what do you have? The dumpsters, the rats, the entrance to the parking lot, or whatever. Now, it's not the most beautiful street in the city, but thanks to having that dirty alley, is that you have nicer streets to walk on, because all the unwanted things are in the alley. Well, so that is something again when you're designing an urban fabric. How do you service an area and you minimize the impact on the streets that you want to have lively, healthy, whatever? Now, this is funny. This is funny. I mean, it's great. Is this what we want? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. I'm not.
It feels pretty terrible.
It feels a bit too tight.
Yeah.
So where do you do it? How do you do it?
It wasn't really thought through.
Do you
Probably.
expand the sidewalks? Do you have planting to allow the residents to have their tables without the structure? I mean, these are very interesting design questions.
structure for Western.
Definitely.
Wow. This
The heating, yeah.
This
They're not messing around here.
No,
That's why I don't see them giving them up. Especially something like the Dandelion here.
What?
This restaurant here. This is the prime brunch with mom spot. Yeah. As you can tell from the flowers and fancy sign.
They're very interesting indicators of, I mean, if you're doing this, and obviously you have the restaurant people that already took over the street and investing things, well, maybe it's the moment to say, well, why don't we try to make the street completely pedestrian?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Exactly.
And we forget about these stupid structures, but it's, and we designed the section.
Yeah. Design and section, right?
Came up. Where on earth? Where on earth is the Bruno's?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a side entrance and
The side entrance we just walked
we just,
by,
oh, let's go.
but it seemed
You
closed.
see, well,
Yeah.
well, some people just need a bathroom, I mean, we have a break.
Yeah, I think a few people can use the restroom, including me. It's probably TMI, but you know, so you get the full experience. Look at this. This is a nice road. It's quite busy.
Look,
These, I like these.
some people were asking for a washroom, so we're going into the Bruno's. I must have bathroom. I guess we need Matt. Okay, and we'll say about 10 minutes. Somebody wants to have a drink or something, and we convene here in 10 minutes.
10-minute break. We'll be back, people. Stay tuned for Jackson's section of the tour.
China can go to the China can go to the bathroom too.
We're all going to the bathroom. All right. Okay,
Yeah, it's kind of pretty.
you gotta walk to him. Hello, hello.
Yeah, that's chef's.
Are we in?
We're in.
Can anybody interact with you on this? Oh, okay.
No, it's just Layla.
Maybe if we. You guys are just stuck with me then. Let's see.
Hello, Jackson.
Hey, Layla, how's it going?
Good. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
helping us. I should change the YouTube link to students because let me see. Let me check one thing.
Okay.
I guess I should change. I'm changing the YouTube link.
Okay.